Hello everyone, welcome to the channel, wherever you're watching from, whether it's morning, evening, or the kind of midnight that only candles understand. I'm glad you're here. Comment down below. Where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Grab a blanket, maybe a cup of something warm, and get ready to travel back in time. Because today, we're stepping deep into the past, to a world with no electricity, no running water, and where survival began not with strength or steel, but with fire. This is Ash and Breath, the Ember Wake Saga, a long-form cinematic. Journey through medieval survival, mystery, and the power of a single ember. Dim the lights. Let the wind outside sound like forest leaves. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft, distant hum. And now, let's begin. In the world before fire was a convenience. It was survival itself. Heat, light, protection, food without fire. A person didn't just suffer, they vanished. So when I left the ruins of my old life, I carried not bread, not a blade, but an ember. A fading coal cradled in dried moss, tucked inside a horn of bone and wool, my portable fire bundle. We didn't strike flint in those days unless we had no choice. Flint and steel were fickle, especially with damp fingers and freezing wind. But a smoldering ember that was life on demand. With breath, patience, and the right tinder. I could call fire back from the brink. Some wrapped their embers in linen, soaked in saltpeter or fat to keep it warm for days. Others buried it in punkwood, carried close to the chest like a heartbeat. I had learned to love the scent of moss scorch and ash dot to me. It meant I wouldn't freeze tonight. Shelter came next. And not with cut beams or nails with branches. Wada woven like baskets, lashed between posts driven into mud. DABBED with daub, clay, straw, and dung. The stink faded, the warmth stayed. The first time I built one, it leaned like a drunk against a tree. By my third, it stood tall enough for smoke to drift upward without choking me. I lined the walls with dried herbs, not for comfort, but survival. Lavender, mint, wormwood, pennyroyal. Their scent repelled lice and biting flies, stuffed into straw bedding. It turned sleep into something almost safe. And then came food. We didn't salt meat because we liked the taste. We salted because winter was death and hunger sharpened faster than knives. We smoked it slowly, hidden behind the fire. Not over it, where the cool smoke curled and clung. The first ham I smoked turned black and brittle. The second survived into February. By the third season, I could smoke rabbit, fish, even squirrel, enough to last. And when meat was scarce, I dug roots. Nuts, bark soaked, and boiled 3 times to leach the poison. All of it stored in clay, unglazed. Porous pots buried in shaded pits. The earth kept them cool, clay kept them dry. Even in heat, they sweated out moisture, cooling what lay within. No ice, no cellar, just physics and dirt. Sometimes I'd heat a brick of clay near the fire, wrap it in wool, and sleep with it. The old folk called them nightstones. I called it the difference between frostbite and fingers. For pain, cabbage, a leaf, crushed and laid against the skin, cooled bruises and swelling, sometimes warmed, sometimes cold, depending on the hurt. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. It didn't require bloodletting. Teeth were another matter. We didn't have brushes. I had ash charcoal, salt, crushed mint rubbed on with a cloth or stick. It scraped. It hurt, but it kept rot away mostly. The land itself protected me if I treated it right. Living fences grew from hawthorn. Hazel, willow, woven live into walls. Thorny, thick, buzzing with bees. They held the livestock in, the wolves out, and always sound. Before I could see my way, I listened. The bell of my own campfire's crackle. The wind clacking hollow reeds. The distant echoes of gulls meant water, a rhythm of safety. That was how I lived, day by day. Ash and breath. Then came Ellen. We moved on from the burned village with heavier hearts and lighter packs. The dog stayed close. Rurik said little, eyes always scanning the horizon. Ellen studied the old map like it was a prayer she'd forgotten the words to. by twilight. We reached a hollow between the hills where a spring still flowed, cold, clear, untouched. We drank in silence, letting the water wash the smoke and sorrow from our tongues. But nothing cleansed the dread. That night I dreamed of fire, not mine, theirs. Fire without warmth. Fire that consumed not just wood and cloth, but memory, name, and voice. When I woke, my ember pouch was warm against my chest, but my fingers trembled as if they already held ash-dot days blurred. The forest thickened. The mist returned. And then, a voice, not loud. Not near, but clear. A child's voice, humming a lullaby no mother should have taught. Ellen froze mid-step. Rurik's hand went to his blade. I held the fire. We followed the sound. It led us to a clearing ringed in stones, where no birds sang, and even the insects dared not buzz. In the center stood a single figure, small, cloaked. Face obscured by a hood stitched with symbols older than the path. The humming stopped. "You carry the ember," it said. The voice was neither boy nor girl. Not old, not young. It just was. I nodded. The figure raised a hand, and in its palm, a mark burned. Not with flame, but with recognition, the same as mine. The fire-bearer's mark. "You are late," it said. Late for what? The figure turned slightly, and behind them stones began to glow, faint like coals under dust. A circle, a gate, for the remembering. The wind rose. Not strong, but purposeful. The trees bowed. The fire in my pouch pulsed like a heartbeat. "We thought we were running from them," Ellen whispered, "but we're being led." The figure stepped aside. The path was open. Glow beckoned. I stepped forward, past memory, past fear, into the ember's heart, and the remembering began. The moment I crossed the threshold of that glowing ring, the world changed. Not all at once, no flash of light, no crack of thunder, just a deep stillness, like a breath held too long. The air was thicker here, warmer. The colors of the forest behind me dulled, muted like memory. But ahead, the world sharpened. Trees stood straighter, older, their bark marked with the same symbols I'd seen on the fire-bearer's parchment and on my own skin. The figure, the childlike one, did not follow. They vanished the moment I looked back. Rurik and Ellen were beside me, but they looked different too. Tired, yes, but also focused, like something had cleared behind their eyes. We were in a place that remembered what the rest of the world had forgotten. The circle of the first flame, that's what Ellen called it, her voice low and reverent. They say this is where fire first spoke. I didn't ask who they were. I only listened. In the center of the circle stood a pillar of stone, not carved by hands, but by heat. Glass smooth, blackened at the edges. Round it, smaller stones formed a spiral inward, each marked with charcoal script in old blood. This is where they made the first ember, Ellen said, and the oath that bound us to it. I stepped toward the center. The ember in my pouch flared, bright and sudden. The fire leaped, not outward, but inward. My breath caught. For a moment, I couldn't see, couldn't breathe. Then memory, not mine. Others 1,000 lives poured into me like smoke through cracks. I saw the first bearer lighting the night in a world of beasts. I saw a woman burning her village to save it from the hollow ones. I saw a child walking alone with nothing but a spark to keep them warm, and the stars bending to shield them. I saw what the hollow ones were, not creatures, not ghosts. Forgetting they were forgetting made flesh. The slow rot of knowledge, of memory, of stories untold and flames left to die. They fed on silence, on lost names, on embers gone cold, and they were growing. When I awoke, I was kneeling. Ellen and Rurik held me steady. The pillar still stood. My ember pouch empty, but in my hand was a new flame. It didn't burn. Not the skin, not the air. But it pulsed with purpose. The first flame had chosen. No longer a bearer of old fire. Now, I was the kindler and the hollow. Ones would come for me with all the fury of the dark, but I no longer ran. I would burn back. We descended from the circle of the first flame before dawn. The sky was still dark, but the trees gave way to stars again. The mist was gone, chased off by the ember now pulsing in my hand. Not a flame, but a presence. A warmth that never dimmed, no matter how the wind bit or how deep the shadows pressed. We did not speak much. Rurik walked ahead, his axe across his back, but his hand never far from the hilt. Ellen stayed at my side, one eye on the path, one on the horizon. Even the dog moved differently now, her nose to the ground, tail low. As if the forest itself whispered to her, we came across ruins older than any village I had known, stone walls, half swallowed by moss, arched doorways leading nowhere, a well choked with ivy and something darker underneath. Ellen said it was once a place of gathering for the kindlers, when there were more of us. Now, there was only me. That night, dared. Build a fire, not for warmth. For message, the first flame rose, not from tinder, but from will. I touched the ember to the stones, and the fire grew bright, golden, clean. A column of heat that did not smoke, that did not consume the logs beneath it. A beacon. What if? They see it? Rurik asked. I want them to, I said, because it was time to stop hiding. They came before sunrise, shadows at first. Too quiet. Wrong quiet. The kind that stilled birds and froze sap in trees. Then the hum. The same sound from the ridge, deeper now, like wind dragging across hollow bone. The dog growled low. Ellen stood, her blade drawn. Rurik moved beside, her eyes scanning the black between the trees. I stepped forward, and the fire moved with me. It did not burn the way fire should. It shaped itself around my hands, curling into lines, forming symbols I hadn't learned but somehow knew. The hollow ones emerged. Not men, not beasts. Shapes draped in rot and silence. Eyes like ash, skin like faded parchment. What reached out? Its fingers trailing smoke. I spoke the first word of the old flame. Not loud, not shouted. This is true, and the world answered. The fire struck without spark. It leaped from the ground like a beast unleashed, roaring into the shape of a serpent, a bird, a storm. It swallowed the hollow one where it stood, and when the fire passed, nothing remained but silence. The others did not run. They circled. Ellen. And Rurik took stance, blades out, back to back. But I stepped between them. The ember flared, and I walked forward. The fight was not a fight. It was a memory. I did not strike. I remembered how to burn. The fire taught me. Every flicker a lesson. Every wave of heat an echo of those who bore the flame before me. One by one, the hollow ones fell. But each time the ember dimmed slightly. Not in heat, but in clarity, like a candle flickering in wind. I knew then the flame had cost, and it had limits. When the last of them fell into ash, the fire quieted. I dropped to one knee. Ellen was beside me in moments, steadying me. Rurik, bleeding from a shallow cut, nodded once. The dog whined but did not run. We had survived, but now. I knew the truth. This wasn't a hunt. This was a war. And I was the last kindler, the last light, and the dark. It was only just beginning. We left the battlefield of ashes with the weight of silence heavy on our backs. The hollow ones were gone, for now, but the land still felt wounded. Trees leaned away from the scorched ground. Birds did not return to their nests. Even the wind seemed unsure of itself. Rurik wrapped his arm with cloth, blood soaking through, slow and steady. He didn't complain. Just walked beside me like a shadow made solid. Ellen said nothing. But I could see the way she looked at the horizon like it had betrayed her. The fire inside my hand no longer burned. It glowed. We headed west, following what once had been. A road, stoned beneath moss, old ruts where carts had long ago passed. The dog scouted ahead, her ears always moving. She sensed it too. We were not alone. By dusk, we reached a stone bridge half swallowed by ivy. It arched over a river that moved thick and dark like a vein of oil beneath the trees. We made camp on the far side, high ground, dry, defensible. That night, no one slept. We took turns staring into the darkness, not because of fear, but because of memory. I remembered the faces from the fire's visions, the first bearers, the battles they fought, the losses they endured, and the promise they made: the ember must never die. Ellen finally spoke. If the hollow ones find the circle again, they'll kill the flame at its root. Rurik nodded. They'll unmake the world, not burn it. And me? I said nothing, because in my chest I felt the ember pulse once, slow and deep, like it agreed. At dawn, we moved, past empty towers with windows like hollow eyes, through fields where nothing grew but boneweed, a plant that only thrived in death. By midday, we reached the edge of the valley, and we saw it. The ruins of Calwyn, a city of the old kindlers. Stone halls shaped like flame, temples carved with the mark of the ember, all broken, now silent. Ellen dropped to one knee. Rurik just whispered, "Gods help us." But I walked forward, because something waited for me there. Not a weapon, not a map, a memory, one I hadn't yet lived. And as I stepped through the shattered gates of Calwyn, fire inside me whispered its first true name. Not flame, not ember. Hope. The ruins of Calwyn held more than dust and silence. We moved carefully. Through the crumbled streets, buildings leaned in strange directions, their stones blackened with old fire. Statues once tall and proud now lay in pieces, moss growing through their broken mouths. But the air was alive, not with wind. With memory, every step I took sparked something beneath my skin. Echoes of voices, glimpses of faces, children laughing, kindlers walking in robes of red and gold, fire dancing along their arms like it was part of them. This was once a sanctuary, and now only I remained. We found a staircase leading down beneath a broken temple. Rurik led with a torch. Ellen followed, her hand on the wall. I went last. My fingers curled around the ember pouch. The stairs opened into a chamber carved into the earth itself. Pillars lined the room, each marked with a symbol of the flame. In the center stood a pedestal of black stone, no dust, no decay, as if the years had not touched it. I stepped forward, drawn by something deeper than thought. Laid upon the stone was a book, its cover cracked. Its pages curled, but the fire in my chest flared the moment I touched it. It opened without effort. Inside were words I'd never learned, but somehow understood. Lessons, histories, warnings. The last page held a single phrase, written in ink, so dark it seemed to move. Asterisk, asterisk, the flame lives through the bearer, but if the bearer breaks, the hollow returns unbound. Asterisk, asterisk, I looked up and I understood this was not just a journey to survive. This was a test of strength, of soul, and of fire. We left Calwyn before the second moon rose. The path ahead wound through black pines and narrow passes. But something had changed. Not in the world, in me. I no longer feared the hollow. I feared what would happen if I failed. And as the ember warmed again in my hand, I swore to the silence, to the stars, and to every name forgotten by time, I will not break. 3 days passed since Kyle went. The path turned harsher. No more ruins, no more signs of old roads, only stone underfoot and a wind that howled like it remembered our names. Food dwindled. The last of the smoked rabbit was gone. We rationed roots and bitter nuts soaked in clay water, and even the dog learned to chew bark for warmth. Rurik's wound festered. He wouldn't say it, but I saw him tremble at night, even under wool and ember stone. Ellen began talking in her sleep, not words, names. We did not know. Names that made the fire in my chest flicker and rise unbidden. We passed through a narrow gorge on the 4th day, its walls carved not by time, but by flame. The rocks were melted in patterns, like the aftermath of a great burning long buried. And there, at its heart, A symbol carved into the wall, the spiral of the hollow ones, encircled in soot. ELEN stopped, her face pale as ash. This is where they fell. Ooh! I asked. She touched the wall, fingers trembling. The 9. The last circle before Kaelwyn burned. Tried to seal the hollow here, and failed. I felt the heat build under my skin. The ember pulse quickened. What sealed it then? Ellen turned. Not what, who. And then she looked at me. Like she had always known. Like the ember had chosen long before I held it. That night I could not sleep. I walked from the camp, up the ridge, past fallen stones, and the remains of old fire pits. The moon rose behind cloud-thick skies, and yet the path glowed faintly beneath my feet, and there, in a ring of standing. Stones barely taller than my waist. I saw them. Ghosts, maybe. Echoes at 9 figures, cloaked and hooded, each holding flame. But one stood at the center, barehanded, broken, burning from within. Me, or something that had once been me. It turned. It opened its mouth, and from it came no words, only flame. I stumbled back, blinking, and the vision was gone, but the heat remained, not on the outside, inside, like a voice waiting to speak. Fire waiting to become more than ember. We broke camp. In silence, the hollow was near. We felt it in our bones, and the fire in my chest was no longer just warmth. It was a warning. The forest ended without warning. One moment we were surrounded by trees, the next we stepped into a basin carved by wind and shadow. Nothing grew here. No grass, no moss, just cracked earth. And standing stones leaning inward, as though drawn toward a center they could not resist. We had found it. The hollow, it did not roar or pulse with darkness. It breathed, slow, deep, like a great slumbering thing just beneath the surface. The dog refused to enter. She whined low, ears flat, and backed away until she vanished between the trees. I understood. Even Rurik hesitated. But Ellen stepped forward like she had always known this place. There's something here, she said. The ember in my chest burned like a forge. I stepped into the hollow. The silence was complete. No wind, no echo. Just the crunch of our steps and the sound of my own breath. At the center stood a stone altar. Ancient, covered in ash that never scattered. I touched it, and the world tore open. Not my world. The one before. A city in flame. Skies torn with crimson light. People screaming as shapes moved between buildings, not walking, but gliding. As if they floated just beneath the skin of reality. The hollow ones. I saw the 9 again. Hands clasped in a circle, fire spiraling from their palms, pouring into the sky like a last defiance. And then a spark broke free. Fell through darkness, through time, through memory, until it landed in my hands. The ember, the vision ended. I staggered, breath gone. Rurik caught me. Ellen's voice was steady. Now you understand. I nodded. The ember wasn't just a tool. It was the last shard of resistance, a promise, a curse, and I was its bearer. We can't run anymore. I said no. Ellen agreed, but we don't have to. She knelt, brushing aside dust and revealing carvings beneath the altar. A pattern of flame. A map, not of land, but of light. A way to reignite what was lost. Rurik stood, and we bring the fire. Back. I opened my hand. The ember glowed white. The hollow began to hum. The humming grew louder. Not a sound. Exactly, more vibration, like the earth itself was remembering a tune it had tried to forget. We followed the carved flame map from the altar. Tracing the path with our feet, one step at a time, it twisted us through stone and shadow, deeper into the hollow. The further we walked, the more the world changed. Light bent strangely here. Shapes moved in the corners of our eyes, tall, robed figures flickering like candlelight on water. But when we turned to look, they were gone. We said nothing. Even Rurik stayed quiet, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his blade. At the heart of the hollow, we found the circle. 9 stone thrones stood in a ring, each cracked and weathered, yet still somehow full of presence. In the center, a black pit yawned, rimmed in glowing runes. Ellen knelt by one of the thrones, brushing away centuries of ash. "This was hers," she said softly. "The one who held the ember before you." The flame in my chest ached, like memory, like grief. "What happened to her?" I asked. Rurik answered. "She burned, and the hollow slept." Ellen looked up, but only slept, stepped to the center of the ring. The pit below pulsed. Not with light, with hunger. It wanted the ember. It wanted me. I didn't throw it. Instead, I knelt. I held the ember in both hands and whispered not words, but memory of warmth, of safety, of fire held against winter's breath. The ember answered it, flared not in anger, but in defiance. A column of white flame erupted upward, curling through the runes, racing along the thrones, igniting the air with heat so pure it made the stone scream. From the pit rose a sound like 1,000 voices, inhaling at once, then silence. The hollow recoiled. The flame pushed it back. Ellen's eyes glowed gold. Rurik shielded his face. I stood in the center of the fire, untouched. The ember was no longer just mine. It was awake when the light faded. We were not alone. The thrones were no longer empty. Figures sat upon them, or rather, impressions of figures, cloaked in shadow, lit from within by threads of fire. Their faces were lost to time, but their presence shook the stones. They looked at me not with anger, not with fear, recognition. One by one, they raised their hands, palms outward, flame flickering in their hollow forms. Ellen stepped back. The 9, Rurik dropped to one knee, whether in awe or terror. I couldn't tell. I could not move. Then the voice came not from one figure, but all, spoken as a single will. Asterisk, asterisk, bearer, kindler, ashburn. The titles fell like embers, soft and scorching. You woke what was sealed. You reignite what was dimmed. Will you carry what we could not? Asterisk, asterisk. I tried to speak, failed, swallowed, and tried. Again, yes. A silence, deep and absolute. Then the flame burst from their chests, 9 tongues of fire arcing into the air, spiraling into one, and struck me. Pain, not like heat, but like memory, flooding in too fast. I saw their lives, their deaths, the moment the hollow broke free, the sacrifice, the pact. The ember wasn't just fire, it was a fragment of them. Each bearer, its flamekeeper, had added to it, and now it lived in me. When I opened my eyes, the thrones were empty. Again, Ellen crouched beside me, her face pale with awe. Rurik stood watch, blade drawn, but the hollow was silent now. We were alone again, but different. I could feel the land, the trees, the stone, even the ash in the wind, and beneath it all, the hollow, still vast, still waiting, but afraid. For the first time, we left the basin as the sun rose behind shattered clouds, and the path ahead was clear, not because the hollow had vanished, but because we would meet it on our terms, now with fire, with memory, and with all who had carried the ember before. We walked for 3 days beneath skies that refused to clear. The ember no longer. Rode hidden in my pouch, it pulsed beneath my skin, a constant warmth in my chest. It did not sleep, and neither did I, not fully. Dreams came now like visions, voices whispering in the language of flame, maps scrawled in smoke, warnings etched in the howl of the wind. On the 4th morning, we reached the edge of the ashole, where once had been forests and rivers now lay, only blackened earth. Trees stood like charred bones. The ground hissed with hidden heat, and across it all, the mist returned, thick, curling low, hiding the horizon. Rurik tied a cloth over his mouth. Nothing grows here anymore. Ellen knelt, running her fingers through the soot. It wasn't fire that did this. She looked up at me. It was what tried to stop it. The hollow wasn't a place. It was a hunger, thought, a silence that grew where memory died. And fire, true fire, was its opposite. As we crossed the ashlands, we found signs of others. Carvings in black stone, circles of salt that had long since scattered, symbols traced in charcoal protection, or warning, could be both. They had tried to hold the hollow back, but it had bled through anyway. At dusk, we found a ruin, not a village too large. A sanctuary, maybe once, towers broken, walls sunk into the ash, and at its center, a pool of still water that shimmered without wind. Ellen gasped. A mirror well. Even Rurik looked surprised. They said none survived the breaking. I approached it slowly. The water held no reflection, only flame, and in its depths a face. Not mine, a child. Eyes like coals, watching, then the surface. Rippled, the vision vanished, and a voice echoed, soft as breath. Asterisk, asterisk, Ashburn. The hollow knows you now. I stepped back. The pool began to boil. Then a shape rose from it. Not water, not ash. A hollow one born from reflection, wrapped in silence. Eyes empty of light. Rurik drew steel. Ellen reached for her herbs, her hands already shaking, but I raised. Mine. And the ember answered. The fire didn't burn outward, sank into the air, filling the space between us with shimmering heat. The hollow one recoiled, hissing not in pain but memory. Flame licked across its surface. Not destroying, revealing, beneath the black, face human, pale, scared. A child. It had been one of us once. The fire faded. The hollow. One collapsed into steam and silence. We stood in the ruin, hearts racing. Ellen whispered, they were taken, not made. And I knew she was right. The hollow didn't create. It consumed, but fire remembers. And so would I that night. We did not light a fire. Not because we feared discovery, but because the ember within me no longer needed flame to warm. Us. Its glow was enough, faint beneath the skin, yet powerful as a hearth. We camped in the shadow of the ruin, near the dry bones of one scranned columns. The dog curled beside me, unsettled. Her ears twitched at noises I could no longer call wind. Ellen laid herbs around the perimeter, muttering old protection chants. Rurik sharpened his blade. We hadn't struck anything in days. Sleep came only in pieces, and when it did, I dreamed of the child's face beneath the hollow one's shell, of hands reaching out through the fog. Not to harm, but to be. Held morning was gray. We moved quickly, pushing east across the crumbling black plain toward the last marked stone on Elon's flame map, a place called the Ma No. One spoke of what lay there, but all the trails ended at its edge. By noon we saw it, a rift in the world wide, jagged, impossibly deep, as if the earth itself had screamed and torn open. The air above it shimmered, not with heat, with memory, now. You could hear things when you got close. Not voices, not quite. Echoes of thought. I heard my mother singing. A tune I hadn't heard. Since I was a boy, Ellen heard something too. Her face went pale. She didn't say what. We made camp well back from the edge, and waited. Because we're not alone. Shapes moved on the far side of the maw. Dozens, maybe more. Not all were hollow ones. Some still remembered what it meant to be human, and they were. Coming, they came at dusk, not with the silence of the hollow, but with the caution of those who remembered fear. Figures cloaked in ash-colored robes, faces veiled, steps careful. Their leader, a woman whose eyes burned with the same ember glow, I carried. She stepped forward, raised a hand. I am Sira, she said, keeper of the forgotten flame. Behind her, dozens more waited, holding torches that did not smoke, blades that shimmered like obsidian licked by fire. Ellen stepped forward, but did not speak. Rurik stood ready. Eyes narrowed, but I answered, I am Ashburn. Sira smiled. Not. Warmly, not cruelly, just with the weight of understanding. Then you are what we have waited for. That night. They told us everything. The maw was once a sanctuary, a vault built by the first flame bearers to guard what remained after. The breaking. Beneath it slept the ember well, the source of the oldest fire, sealed by sacrifice and song, but it was weakening. The hollow pressed from below, not above. It fed not on light, but on what the flame remembered. Warmth, story, names, and the ember inside me. It was the key not to destruction, to restoration. If you descend, Sira warned, you will not return the same. I looked across the flames at Rurik, who said nothing. At Ellen, who met my gaze and nodded once. I felt the ember stir. I knew my answer. At dawn, we approached the maw. The air shimmered. The whispers rose, but I no longer feared them. One by one, the others stayed behind. Only I crossed the edge and began the descent. The maw did not open like a cave or tunnel. It spiraled, walls of fused stone and glimmering ash coiled downward like the throat of some ancient beast. I walked in silence, every footstep muffled by a layer of soot that seemed to pulse faintly beneath my weight. The ember in my chest throbbed, echoing the rhythm of the descent. With every turn, I felt less of. The world above, less cold, less fear, even less of myself, but more of something deeper. Not darkness, but memory, like smoke curling from forgotten pages. And then I reached it. The ember well. It was not a pool. It was a wound. A vast hollow chamber, lit by a slow, molten glow that rose from a chasm, too. Deep to see. Around its edge, statues of the first flame-bearers stood, robed figures carved from obsidian. Their hands extended over the fire, as if an offering above the well floated. A sphere of flame, silent, suspended, alive, and inside it, thousands of lights, flickering like trapped fireflies. Each one pulsed in rhythm with the ember in my chest. Memories, lives, stories. I stepped forward. The flame pulsed in greeting, and from its heart a voice emerged. Asterisk, asterisk, Ashburn. Will you carry the flame or become? It, asterisk, asterisk. I didn't answer with words. I knelt, placed my hand to the ground. Let the ember rise through my palm, and I gave it everything. My pain, my past, my fear, my name. I gave the ember the story. The flame surged. It didn't consume me. It expanded memory. Poured outward. Not just mine, but all those lost to the hollow. I felt them as wind in my lungs, warmth in my bones, names I never knew, songs I'd never heard. A child's laugh, a mother's lullaby, a warrior's cry. The hollow could not erase what was held in flame, and the ember well roared. Above the ashlands shook. The hollow recoiled, and far away, Ellen looked to the sky and whispered, "He burns, but not as a man, as a beacon." When I rose from the ember well, I was not the same. The ember no longer beat in my chest. It was my chest, my veins, my breath, my shadow on the stone. I walked with fire trailing in my footsteps, not burning, but illuminating, revealing not the world, but the truths within it. The hollow felt it instantly. They surged upward through the deep cracks of the maw, no longer silent, screeching, shrieking, twisting in forms no longer human. I saw their eyes empty, desperate, hungry for the warmth I now bore, but they could not touch me. I did not raise a blade. I raised a hand, and flame answered, not from the air, from the ground.
Ow.
The stone, the memory sealed within the soil of the broken world. Fire not of destruction, but of restoration. Each hollow that reached me dissolved into ash, not screaming, but sighing. Released because they had once been bearers. 2, they had once been people. I returned from the maw at dawn. Ellen was there. Rurik. 2, so was Sarah, her eyes wide, not in fear, but awe. The light around me did not fade. It followed and from every hilltop, every ruined spire, every shattered village, people began to emerge, drawn by something older than fear. The call of flame remembered. They did not bow. They stood, and I knew then. This was not the end of a journey. It was the lighting of 1,000 more. The age of ash had passed. Now began the age of breath and flame. It began not with silence, but with a song, low, wordless, carried on the wind from the far edges of the waking lands. A melody woven from voices long forgotten, not mournful, not joyful, but insistent. I felt it in the bones of the world. The flame inside me pulsed in reply. This was no longer about survival. This was the reckoning of a world forgotten by its own memory. We walked again. Ellen at my side, silent as always, her bow now strung with silver-threaded sinew, gifted by the ash keepers. Rurik with his axe newly reforged, notched with the symbols of the maw, a weapon, but also a promise. Sira remained behind, to guide the scattered and the found. A keeper no longer, she had become a teacher, but I was something else now. People called me Ashburn, some called me Flamebearer. One child whispered, Ember King, and fled laughing into the woods. But I was just me carrying the light forward. Our path led east, toward the drowned lands where fire once fell from the sky and turned stone to glass. A place the maps had long abandoned. It's called now only the Emberwake, a name spoken with caution, or not at all. The hollow was not gone. It had only retreated, and something older stirred. Beneath the scorched lakes and jagged plains, something, waiting, watching, remembering. We made camp beneath a dead sky. The stars there were wrong drifting, faint like old embers, struggling to reignite. Ellen traced a circle in salt around our fire. Rurik said no words that night, only sharpened his axe. And I dreamed. Of flame running uphill, of towers made of bone and brass, of a girl with eyes like mine standing on the edge of a lake of fire, reaching out, calling me brother. The second night in the Emberwake was colder than the first, not in temperature, but in silence. Ellen didn't speak. Rurik stayed on the edge of camp, his eyes fixed. Eastward, the flames we lit gave off heat, but cast no warmth into the space between us. Something had followed us out of the drowned hills. Not a beast, not a hollow memory. I dreamed again, but this time I didn't sleep. I saw the girl with my eyes again, her feet bare against blackened glass. She stood atop a ridge of stone that shimmered in shifting light as if fire were frozen in its surface. Around her were the ruins of towers. Bones turned to spires, and in her hand, a spark. The same ember I had carried since the beginning. She did not speak, but I heard her. Come find me. I woke without knowing I had slept. Rurik was gone. We found his footprints leading away from camp. Deliberate, steady, heading toward the east. Toward the place we had vowed not to go. The Lake of Fire, no map marked its name, but stories did. A place where Skyfire once fell in the age before stories became myth. A place where nothing lived, and yet something now stirred. We followed. Without hesitation, hours passed. The terrain hardened. Grass became gravel. Gravel became glass. Each step sang beneath our feet, high. Brittle tones that echoed like distant bells. And then we saw it. The lake, a vast plain of obsidian, cracked and webbed with pools of molten color glimmering between fractures. No water, only flame, trapped beneath stone. And in the center, Rurik stood, but he was not alone. Figures surrounded him, not hollow, not human, something between. Draped in ash, eyes glowing with the light of buried coals. Their hands were open, their mouths moved in silent words. He did not run. He reached toward them. In the moment his fingers touched one of theirs, the entire lake ignited, not in fire. In memory, a pulse of heat rolled outward. But it was not heat of destruction. It was recognition. The glass beneath our feet rippled with vision. Cities built of stone and smoke. Towers burning from within. People with flame in there. Chests walking among stars. And then it was gone. Rurik collapsed. Ellen screamed his name and ran to him. I followed, unsure if I ran toward danger or the truth. When we reached him, his eyes were open, glowing faintly. The figures were gone. He looked at me and whispered, "They remember you." We sheltered in the ruins of an old watchtower that night, little more than melted stone and leaning timber. Rurik slept, but his breathing was strange, shallow, quick, as if his dreams demanded too much from him. Ellen tended to him with herbs and silence, kept the fire alive. There was no wood out. Here, only dry stalks, brittle reeds that hissed as they burned. But the ember held. It always held. The memory of the lake stayed with me. Not just the vision, the feeling. Like something had seen me and recognized me, not for what I was, but what I would become. "You've changed," Ellen said without looking up. I stared at her. "So have you," I answered. She gave a small smile. "Not like you." I didn't ask what she meant. Some truths burned too brightly to hold for long by dawn. Rurik had awoken, but he was different. He remembered nothing of the encounter, only fragments, a name he didn't recognize, a place he had never seen. And when he tried to recall the figures that had surrounded him, his eyes filled with tears. "I knew them," he whispered, "and I lost them again." We didn't speak after that. We just walked through broken lands and sky-shattered trees, past craters filled with moss and bones. The ember wake was not lifeless, it was haunted. Each ruin whispered the same word, "Remember," on. The fifth day, we found the gate. It wasn't made of stone or metal. It was light suspended between two leaning spires, flickering like flame in water. And within that light, we saw shapes move, not people. Memories, moments caught in the glow. A woman cradling a child made of ember, a battle lit only by firelight. A great tree burning in reverse, flame becoming leaf, ash becoming bark. Ellen reached for it. The light recoiled. I stepped forward. It held. And then I heard a voice. Not Ellen's, not Rurik's. Mine, from within. "Welcome home." The moment I stepped through the light, the world didn't change. It turned inside out. Heat flooded my lungs. Not burning, but overwhelming, like breathing the memory of fire. The gate behind me vanished in a shimmer. Ellen and Rurik were gone, not lost, simply ... elsewhere. This was not the Ember Wake. This was before a forest, vast and golden. Trees like towers, leaves like embers in sunlight. And above it all, a sky pierced with fire trails. Not falling stars, but something else. Ships? Spirits? I couldn't tell. I looked down. My hands burned, not with pain. With memory symbols. Bloomed across my skin, the same ones from the map Ellen carried. They pulsed like breath, like heartbeat. And with every throb, I remembered things I had never lived. I had stood here once. I had lit the first fire. His voice called from behind a tree. Soft, familiar to Ellen. But it wasn't her. It was her before. Younger, unbroken, dressed in robes that shimmered like wind over ash. "You left it burning," she said. I stepped closer. Left what? She turned, and in her hand a coal, glowing alive. The first fire, it still burns, deep below. At the hollow, I've forgotten why. She held it out to me. I reached for it and woke back in the tower. Same cold stones, same flickering fire. Ellen beside me, Rurik asleep. But something was different in my hand. The coal, not dream, not memory. Real, Len saw it and went still. "You." "Crossed," she whispered. I nodded. "We have to go back," she said. "Back where?" She met my eyes. "To where it all started." We traveled south, back through the woods that remembered us. Back across streams that no longer ran clean. Every step felt heavier now. Not from weariness, but weight. It's a kind of weight you carry in your chest. In your soul, the coal I carried didn't dim. It pulsed. Slow. Steady. Like a heart finding its rhythm. Rurik was quiet. Since the lake of fire, his voice had grown softer, less certain. Sometimes he would stop and look behind us. as if someone walked a few paces back unseen. I never asked. I didn't want to know. Ellen seemed to know the way even when there was no path. She spoke to trees in gestures, to the wind with nods. The land trusted her, and so did I on the 7th day. We reached the old fields. Nothing grew here anymore, rows of blackened stumps. Soil gray with ash. The skeletons of scarecrows sagged in place, their straw long gone. The air tasted of memory and smoke. "We're close," Ellen said. I felt it too, not just in the coal, but in the ground beneath us. It humsed at the far edge of the field stood stones, ancient and broken, half sunken into earth. They formed a ring, though many had fallen, a fire circle, not for warmth, for calling. Ellen stepped inside. Her feet didn't disturb the ash. "This is where they were made," she said. "Who?" "The first fire-bearers." She pointed to a stone marked in red. The symbol burned onto my skin. They were chosen. I looked down at the ember in my hand. Am I chosen? Ellen looked at me, not kindly, not sadly, just true. No, you were forged. Night fell fast in the ring of stones. The moment the sun dipped, wind tore across the field, dry and sharp, like a whisper that didn't want to be heard. We lit no fire. Even the coal stayed wrapped and hidden. Whatever power lingered here. Didn't like rivals. We huddled inside a stone arch that had half collapsed. Sharing dried root and silence, Rurik finally spoke. "What happens if we fail?" Ellen didn't look at him. "We don't," he pressed. "But if we do, we don't," she repeated. I looked at the coal again. It was dimmer now, resting, perhaps, or waiting. "You said I was forged?" I said. Ellen's eyes met mine. "Not born, not chosen. You were tempered. Every night of cold. Every missed meal. Every time you fought for flame, when everything was wet and gone that shaped you." I nodded slowly. "Because you never let it die." That night I dreamed of fire again, but this time it wasn't burning. It was speaking. I stood in a hall of ash. Great braziers lined the walls, each a coal like mine, breathing slow light. At the center, a figure cloaked in smoke, face hidden in glow. "You carry the last breath," it said. I stepped forward. "What do I do with it? Light the first or the final?" "Choose." The braziers flickered. One burned bright gold, the other deep red. I turned to ask more. And woke in my hand, the coal burned red, and Ellen's face had gone pale. "It's time," she said. We broke camp at dawn. The coal had turned from red back to gold. But the heat it gave off now was different, deeper, heavier, like it was. Waiting for something larger than flame? Ellen didn't speak for miles. Rick kept glancing at her, then at me, then at the coal as if expecting it to hatch. The trees thinned, the ground sloped, and then we saw it. A tower half buried in the earth, wreathed in vines and fog. It's not stone, but metal, scorched black, humming with memory. Firebearer script lined its edges like old scars. "The anvil," Ellen whispered. We descended. Each step crackled with dry leaves, long untouched. The closer we drew, the more the coal in my hand pulled, not with gravity, but intent. Like a magnet made of memory. At the tower's base, a door warped, sealed, but not unyielding. As I approached, the symbols on my skin lit with the same glow as the ember. The door opened. Inside, heat. Not fire, not light. Just ... presence. Rurik stayed at the entrance. Ellen walked with me. The hall narrowed, and at its end a pedestal. Shaped like cupped hands, I knew what it wanted. I placed the coal in the center. It flared white-hot, silent, pure, and in that flare we saw them. The first fire dash bearers, not in flesh, but in flame. Outlines of old faces, cloaked in light, watching. Not angry, not joyful. Witnessing Lend fell to her knees. Her voice cracked. They remember. The coal began to split, not breaking, but unfolding, a spiral of light rising like smoke. And with it, voices. Hundreds, thousands. whispers. Of every soul who'd ever carried flame, and then silence, one voice mine, but it was not me. The flame is forged. Will it be passed? Ellen stood beside me, her eyes full of ash and tears. You choose. I turned to Rurik at the doorway. I turned to Ellen, survivor of the hollow. I turned to the fire. I pass it on. The flame leapt into the stone, into. The air dot into us. We were not burned. We were changed. The tower walls peeled back like petals. The light spilled into the ashlands. Trees sparked, awoke. Roots twisted and grew, and far off, cross ridge and ruin the hollow, howled, not in pain, in fear, because the fire was no longer one. It was many, and it would not go out again. We descended the tower as the sky changed. The sun bailed for weeks. Behind ash and cloud now burned pale gold, weak but present. The trees whispered with sap again. Grass curled upward from old bones, and behind us the anvil glowed like a second dawn. We walked in silence. No birds sang. No insects stirred. The world was still listening. At camp, Rurik unpacked his blade, not to fight, but to offer it. Pressed it to the flame that now lived inside me, and when he withdrew it, the metal pulsed, a living edge. It's begun, he said. Ellen nodded. The hollow will feel this, and they did. That night their song rose again, not a hum, but a wail, long and high, stretched across the wind like torn cloth. But they did not come. Not yet. We reached the ridge again by twilight. From its peak we saw them, a line of figures, distant, cloaked in shadow. Just beyond the ruins of the village they had erased, waiting, watching. They know we lit it. I said. Ellen stood beside me, her hand resting on the hilt of a blade carved from bone and obsidian. They'll come. Can we stop them? She looked at me, fierce and calm. We already did. That night, the survivors came. One by one, drawn by smoke, by warmth, by the oldest promise in the world, that fire meant safety. Old ones, young, tired, starved, shaking, but alive. Each one carrying something, a coal, a torch, a lantern made. Of shell or clay, all lit from the one I had carried. The fire had spread, and in their eyes I saw it not fear, not worship. Resolve we built no walls, okay? Only flamed. We lit a ring of fire around the ridge. We sang no songs. Only the wind and the embers spoke. And when the hollow came, slithering through trees, robed in silence and hunger we stood, not with swords, with fire. They broke against us like smoke on stone, because for the first time in an age, the hollow did not face the last flame. They faced the first spark of many. I no longer carry the ember alone. We all do, ash and breath. Born of ruin, remade in flame, the fire has returned, and we remember. And so, the fire dims. The last ember curls in on itself, and another forgotten piece of history slips back into the shadows. Maybe you learned something tonight. Maybe you just needed background noise while you drifted off. Either way. I'm glad you made it this far, or that your phone's still playing this while you drool on your pillow. Before you vanish into dreams of smoked ham, thatched roofs, and cabbage compresses, tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now on your side of the medieval map? Drop it in the comments, I actually read. Them while eating old bread. If you want more stories about how people survived long before hot showers and delivery pizza, you know what to do, or don't. I won't yell. I'll just quietly light a rushlight and tell the next tale anyway. Good night, traveler. May your moss stay dry, your embers stay warm, and may no one steal your smoked sausage before dawn.